how should I say this? Well, Uruguay was a better team. There's no ifs. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's quite clear. Yeah, I was thinking about it while I was rewatching some of the highlights to kind of look over and see exactly what I was going to talk about. I had said over on Extra Time TV, of course, you can check it out. My good friend Andre Soclal as well as Terry Fenwick. We were talking about that issue about Bielsa and Uruguay changing. Yes, they have changed, but Marcelo Bielsa also so it's kind of in with the old, out with the new, but the new also has been able to adapt to the old, and there's been kind of this amalgamation within Uruguayan football, within the national team at least, that you've been able to see Marcelo Bielsa change and tweak some of what his philosophy has been about, and really kind of help amplify some of the qualities of Uruguayan football players and Uruguayan national team players. And it seems interesting. It's an interesting dynamic what's going on, because you see that the players are buying into what Bielsa's bringing, and it looks like it's going to be promising. It's pretty fruitful. Two things. One thing is Marcelo Bielsa, the coach. One thing is Bielsism. Just like anything else, usually the prophet is the one that ends up having all the good intentions in the world. It's the religion that ends up following it, the one that kind of ends up being the one that denigrates or kind of makes it look as if it's greater than something else. And when you hear the followers of Marcelo Bielsa talk, it ends up being something completely different than what Marcelo Bielsa is looking to implement. And now you're seeing a bit of a different Bielsa. It's a Bielsa, like I said, is more adaptable, more malleable when it comes to the tactical disposition of a team, but also willing to change. And that's been one of the things that many have criticized Marcelo Bielsa for not being able to do. Today, he ends up establishing a masterclass. Yes, in the early minutes of the match against Argentina, Argentina was the one that was imposing conditions, but you end up being scoreless after, I want to say 15, 20 minutes. Well, Argentina started getting desperate. They started looking for answers where they shouldn't. And in the process, you saw Uruguay beginning to grow into their game, and the positioning of Uruguay ends up being very crucial. One little caveat, if you look at this match, there was one thing that if you looked at what Uruguay did or what Marcelo Bielsa did to counter what has been very successful for Lionel Scaloni, Nico de la Cruz. To me, he was the man of the match. To me, he was the player that really changed this encounter. One thing that he did, which was very interesting, which was different, because in South American play, of course, let's exclude Curacao, let's exclude Panama, let's exclude this version of Australia, or the most recent version of Australia that Argentina faced. Uruguay wasn't going to back down. Uruguay wasn't going to be respectful, if you will. Oh, you're the world champions. Here, go. You can go this way, sir. No problem. They were going to go and see if they could punch Argentina in the mouth, which they did. And what ends up being very, I don't know, it ends up being quite compelling, quite intriguing, is Nico de la Cruz being able to mark McAllister. That in and of itself changed a lot of the facets of the game. It changed a lot of how, when Alexis McAllister is, when Argentina is functioning properly, McAllister has a lot to do with the transportation of the ball, being able to get the ball in the midfield and being able to create the offensive end, if you will. And when Argentina didn't have that outlet in the middle, McAllister, as I'm saying, then there's a lot of problems with Argentina in terms of how they're going to transport the ball. Is it going to be through the fullbacks? Is it going to be sending the ball deep? Which a lot of occasions you saw Nicolas Otamendi sending a deep ball and nobody was there. There were instances where Argentina had to depend on Leo Messi. And it's funny because a few weeks ago or a few months ago, we said, hey, you know what? No longer do they depend on Messi. Well, today they did. They needed to depend on him. And what ends up being kind of interesting about it is that Messi looked good in the first half. Messi was the one that pushed the issue. He was the one that was pushing the envelope for Argentina in this encounter. But another thing that we saw with Uruguay was that for every Argentine, regardless of the sector of the pitch, when there was one Argentine player, there were two Uruguayans. Always. It seemed like Uruguay at times were playing with 14, 15, 16. But you saw a Uruguay side that was able to stifle Argentina. They stifled them. They pressured them. You saw that on many occasions they were able to really take the ball away. Ugarte started to get into the match a bit more. Valverde, of course, doing his thing. Obviously, Ronald Araujo over at right back. Tremendous work by Araujo. And you really look at him as a true gem, not only for Uruguay, but also for Football Club Barcelona. And it's quite amazing to see what's going on. It is a transformation of sorts, as I said. It's a transformation where this team is growing into something different. And mind you, there's one thing that people don't. I mean, and I haven't mentioned everybody in Uruguay yet. Notice that there was one player that did not step onto the pitch. Luis Suarez. So now you see the actual changing of the guard, because when you have that luxury of not having to bring Luis Suarez in, you can bring in and really work a great deal with Darwin Nunez, who's fully grown into his position. He is now the man up top for Uruguay. It's very difficult to see Luis Suarez or Edinson Cavani going and saying, you know what, I'm going to be the... Well, most likely you will see Luis Suarez be the starter against Bolivia or get some minutes against Bolivia. That will be definitely what he's going to do over Estadio Centenario. It might be a really nice send-off if that ends up being the case. I doubt it, but there is that sense of kind of the beginning of the end for Luis Suarez with the Uruguayan national team now that he's winding down his time in Brazil and maybe beginning his time over at Inter Miami. So, like I said, it's these moments, are these instances in the match. Leo Messi, yeah, he hits the crossbar on a free kick, but few times did I believe that Sergio Rochet was going to be under any type of duress, in my opinion. Obviously, there were instances, in Federico Viña, of course. I'm talking about Federico Valverde, I'm sorry. Valverde sends a deep ball in. Viña's able to win that ball, get into the byline, make that run, turns inside, sends the ball in, and then Araujo being able to finish that first goal. And then, of course, Argentina kept pushing, but they were very disorganized. It was probably one of the more disorganized matches that we've seen Argentina play, because not only was it that the starters were struggling, the substitutes weren't able to offer much, and also mentally many players were taken into a place where Argentina don't like to go, and Uruguay don't mind going, which again goes back to the in with the old, but some of the old still remained, and in with the new, and some of the new has been able to be applied very well. Well, when you see that that Uruguay continue to battle, and the match starts getting a bit frantic and a bit intense, and you see a lot of friction, and Leo Messi gets involved, so much so that after the match he talks about how disrespectful some of the younger players were. Rodrigo de Paul gets completely angry at Ugarte for the gesture that he makes, saying that he's Leo Messi's how should I say that would be polite, Leo Messi's basically little mascot, little pet. Just, you kind of take it, a little bit of into that dark place. But you kind of get my drift of what he was saying and the gesture that he made, kind of to insinuate that particular aspect. And De Paul wasn't able to get back into the game. There were several others that kind of got lost when there was more combativeness and there was a need to settle things down. Argentina weren't able to do it. And Uruguay, more composed, understood what they had to do, played the match very well. Pelistri also played well. There are many others that, as I said, Valverde played a great match, and you end up seeing Uruguay, like I said, buying into Bielsa's theory, buying into what Bielsa's offering, and seeing a team that has been different, but at the same time a team that has remained with their identity intact in terms of how they're rugged and they're rough and tumble, but also, hey, we have skill too. We have technical capabilities, and you saw it in the way that Darwin Nunez was able to finish and really basically nail the game down for Uruguay. It's the first time that Uruguay have been able to win in World Cup qualifying play in Argentina. So that shows you a great deal of the tendency that has been favoring Argentina over the past, quite a few World Cup cycles, which you end up seeing on this World Cup round, a bunch of trends that have been bucked, especially when you look at it from the perspective of Uruguay, and of course, as I said before in my previous video, the trends that were bucked by Colombia. So Uruguay are already knocking on the door, waiting to see what happens with Argentina and Brazil, how that's going to play out. It's going to be a crazy Tuesday when everyone starts playing one another, and of course, the main event over at Maracanã, seeing a struggling Brazil face an Argentina that has a bit of blood in their eye. But in the meantime, Uruguay and Colombia end up being the big movers in this last World Cup qualifying round. So make sure you're checking things out. I'll bring more content in the coming days and look to be able to post more in the future. So stay tuned. Stay here. All right?